Hey everyone, welcome. My name is Marilyn Shannon, and this is the Breaking Free Show. And as our name fits our show all the time, we are about breaking through, breaking free, breaking rules, just just moving forward. And sometimes we have to talk about things that are not so easy, but we're going to talk about them and we're going to break through because of them and learn and grow and become, better, whole, healthy, connected, all the things that make for a happy planet. And so before I get on with my show, I just want to say hi to Amnan, who's busy, and I don't know if he could talk to me.
Hello.
How are you?
Fine. How are you?
Good, good, good. Okay, you go back to do
Have a
your
good
work.
show.
All right, thank you. And let me remind everyone, this is your show. You get to call in, you get to comment, ask questions, whatever you desire. Please feel free. You can call in anytime to 919-518-9773. That is if you are on a landline or a cell. You can also join us in our live chat, and that is that you just put your name under our video and you can comment there as well and ask questions and we'll monitor it. You can contact us through Skype, and that is computers 2K voice, computers, that's plural, then the number 2K voice, and you will come in on voice, not video. So don't worry about it. We don't have to see you, we just want to hear from you. And we're also on Facebook and a number of other places. But if you want to come to nissancommunications.com and watch the show, you can, and then you can participate in our live chat. So we have two remarkable women on our show today with incredible stories, and I know that there are many of you out there that have a story to share. And this is a safe space. And I want you to know that you are welcome to contact us during the show any way you want, whether it's in the chat, whether you want to call in on our phone, whether you want to come in on Skype. You are welcome to. And I hope you do. I hope you take me up on it. And I will remind you again. So don't worry, I'll be here. So let me first introduce Mary. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Marilyn.
How are you?
I'm just great. It's a joy to be here.
It is a joy to have you here. And, for those of you who have watched our show before, Mary has been on another show before and had such an incredible story that I just was blown away by. I asked her to please come back and join us specifically to share what she's been through, what she's doing, and how she's moving forward. And just, it's things I just didn't even know about. And so I figured if I didn't know about it, there's some of you out there that don't know about it either. So welcome, Mary, to the show.
Thank you.
Now we
It's
go
yeah.
ahead.
No.
No, say it.
Well, I was just going to say it was a pleasure.
Yeah, it has, and we become like buddies.
Yeah.
Wait, maybe I mean I just love her. So okay, now why don't you go ahead and introduce Stephanie?
Well, first of all, you said there were two great women on the show today. There really are three.
Oh, thank you. I think you're including me. Yeah, I think. Thank
Um,
you. Thank you.
and it's my honor to introduce the third great woman. Her name is Stephanie Buxbaum. And I've had the pleasure also of working with her on a project. And we've become friends. That's what usually happens. And I wanted to say what she may not say or what you can't read about her is that she's a woman of great passion, dedication, commitment. She's done significant work around significant issues. And I can't say enough for her as a producer and, more importantly, as a friend and a
Wonderful.
woman of integrity.
Wonderful. So Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you so much, Marilyn, and thank you, Mary. Those were amazingly kind words. I'm almost getting choked up here. But yeah, it's such a pleasure to be invited here by Mary, and my job is to tell extraordinary stories about extraordinary people, and my focus is oftentimes women and women's stories that may be overlooked. So when I started looking into this issue about 11 years ago, I had no idea the Pandora's box that would open. And I think Mary's right. My passion and sort of sense of self and purpose sort of intertwined and interconnected at that moment, and in a great sort of question of synergy for me, which was, why has this issue of female clergy abuse been overlooked? And so, yeah, I'm flattered to be here. I'm so honored to hear your kind words, Mary, and I'm excited to you shed some light on this very, very important and often overlooked topic.
Right. Yeah, I had no idea this was happening. So I'm gonna ask Mary to kind of give us a little background of this issue, because many of you may have seen the posts, may not have seen the posts. So Mary, tell us the issue and your part in this.
Well, of course, the issue in the large scheme is sexual abuse of men, women, and children. My focus has been working with survivors of priest abuse and now survivors of nun abuse. And in particularly survivors of nun abuse. And it's my own story or journey that brought me right here today, because I was abused by the parish priest when I was 7 and buried that for until I was 52, which supposedly is the age of discovery. And it's only recently, about a year ago, when I finally acknowledged that I too had been sexually abused by a nun when I was a young nun myself. So those two pieces bring me here today, and with the main focus on supporting survivors of nun abuse. And there are more nuns than we know that have abused sexually and or physically, and by shaming, especially young children, teens, and even nuns abusing nuns within their community, misusing their own power to abuse other nuns. So my eyes too, I must say, were opened around this issue, because I didn't know the scope of it. And now in researching and looking at data, it's fair to say over the past 50 years, there have been 650,000 nuns. And it's probably fair to say 2% of those have, in the United States, have sexually abused children, which would amount to about 1,000 or so. And we have only identified and named 200 of those. So this is a great loss for survivors of nun abuse, because they want their stories told. They need their stories told. They need their perpetrators and abusers exposed so that they can move forward in their healing, sometimes seeking justice, sometimes just confronting the religious order.
Mary, let me just interrupt you a second. And I know there's many things that we want to talk about. And so when you said you had been abused
Yes.
at the age of 7, right? And then it wasn't until the age of 52
Yes.
that, did I understand you correctly, that you acknowledged the nun abuse?
No, at age 52, I finally acknowledged, faced, freed the childhood abuse, which I say, put in a shoebox. I buried it. And it just remained there until I believe I was probably strong enough to face it and to deal with it. Because I had been a part of the Catholic Church for my entire life, and a teacher and a principal and a nun. So I think all through that, and I loved my Catholic Church, so to speak. And the only way I could hold that was to separate myself from the aspect of it that would have caused me to have to leave it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it took me till 52, and I actually was still working for the Catholic Church when I was able to let that come into my conscious awareness and say, oh my God, that happened to me. I need to do something.
You know, my first gut reaction yeah, we hear about the priests and all of that, which has become, to a degree, a little more obviously more common. And the fact, when you're holding something like that as a woman or as a child, thinking that a nun would abuse you emotionally, physically, and all of sexually. I mean, you must have thought you were the only one. And how could you even say anything? Or how could this even be? If it's not publicized, and if we're not talking about it, and early on, how awful that must have been, just to
Well,
be holding that to yourself.
well, the thing about it is you dissociate, so you don't know that
Mm,
you're holding that thing. If you did it, or I didn't anyway, if I did, it would have probably been too much to bear. So the dissociation is one of those pluses and
right.
minuses that we use in our life.
Mm,
And the thing you mentioned, yes, once you do face some trauma, you usually think, am I the only one? Uh, are there others? Or you believe you are the only one. And coming to realize there are others, which this show and shows like this help other survivors connect and find they're not alone. There are others and others wanting the same things that they want,
mhm,
especially healing. And
mhm.
when I acknowledged my abuse by a nun a year or so ago, it was the same feeling that was I the only one? And realizing, no, no, there are actually hundreds of others, and coming to terms with that. And I did what women do, I believe, in the nun situation, because it involved a nun taking my face and kissing me all around it as a young nun. So it was a great misuse of power. But I did what I think women do sometimes with that story. I didn't forget it or bury it like the child abuse, but I said, "Oh, you know, that was just a thing. That was an abuse." And I'd tell the story to my friends, and we'd all say, "That was crazy. That was weird," but we wouldn't name it. We wouldn't say, "No, that wasn't just crazy and weird. That was sexual abuse and a grave misuse of power." So I gained a lot of learning from that situation around women and abuse, and how
Mhm.
men do weird and crazy things sometimes, and as do some women to other women, men to, and we just leave it at that, when in truth it needs to be named.
Yeah. Well, it becomes conscious,
Yeah.
right? It,
Mhm.
well, with that being said, it makes me stop and think, oh my God, what could I mean? And we're going to continue with talking about this, but then I think, what's next? I mean, because I would never have thought, a nun would do that, right?
Mhm.
So, I
Mhm.
mean, I can't even imagine where this, what, with this information, where this will go in bringing up something else about something else that would just be like, oh my God, more,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
So, so Stephanie, so
Yes.
you and Mary met because you're doing research. Did you start doing research about this when you met Mary, or had you already? I mean, where were you in this?
I had a morbid curiosity about the clergy abuse scandals that were breaking out in around
The
2006.
men, that was with the men,
Yeah,
right? Okay.
the priests, and like every day that I came to work, I was working on a show for CBS, and every day that I came to work, I would see on my Yahoo News, because that was the big. There was no Google Gmail back then. Another 5 priests arrested in the Boston Globe scandal, or the some other sort of upheaval of the priest scandal. And I like to say I'm a nice Jewish girl, so nothing ever happened to me, and I was not raised in the Catholic Church, so I am definitely I would like to say unbiased outsider looking in and examining this issue from a, I would think, more objective perspective. And I thought to myself, well, aren't there nuns, female clergy in the Catholic Church? I wonder if they have ever abused or if they have been abusive. And so I Googled nun abuse and sexual abuse by nuns, and I was very surprised to find that there were hundreds of articles, even back in 2007 or 8. And I printed out a stack of documents about this thick. I still have the binder of all of these articles, and I started vociferously reading everything that I could. And I thought to myself, this is a big, gaping, glaring hole in this issue. And why is nobody talking about it? Is it because society thinks that a woman can't be a predator? And obviously, there's lots of crime shows about women snapping and killing their husbands, or women who, commit crimes. So I think that we've come to a point that we've advanced to understand that yes, women are criminals too sometimes, and that they can commit heinous crimes. But I think the stigma of having a female sexual predator has not been broken yet. And I feel like that misuse of power that came to light in the Me Too scandal was just beginning to scratch the surface. So back in 2008 or 9, I started researching this idea and got in contact with a woman named Ashley Hill. Ashley Hill had collected a book of letters, and it was called Habits of Sin. And Ashley actually wrote back to me and started giving me some contacts in the world of nun abuse, some survivors who might be willing to talk. And that's when the journey started for me. I began, I bought a camera, I booked a flight, I paid local camera crews, and I started following 2 different women's stories in Pennsylvania. And then after that, I went to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Chicago, Illinois, Baltimore. I went to Washington, D.C. And the more that I filmed these stories, the more similar they started to sound. And I began to construct a narrative that to me was really fascinating, not just finding one bad apple. It wasn't about several survivors of one nun. It was about several survivors of several nuns to show, this isn't just one bad incident. This is a systemic problem that has been overlooked. So, unfortunately, I had to put the documentary on hold because there was no ending. We filmed a bunch of stuff of people being frustrated, really being heard and not given a lot of accountability. And then when the Pennsylvania Archdiocese scandal happened, in I think 2017, is that correct, Mary?
Mhm.
2017. I reached out to SNAP again, and Tim Lennon, who's the head of SNAP, referred me to Mary. And he said, we've actually created a department, a division of Survivors Network of those abused by priests, who is run by a woman who was a former nun, who is a former nun. And you should speak to Mary Dispenza. And we started Skyping, and about 6 or 7 months after our first Skype, we kept in touch. She let me know, hey, we're going to be on CBS News. We're going to be on this outlet. And in January or February, Mary contacted me and said, SNAP and I are going to Rome for the Pope's Clergy Abuse Summit. And I thought, okay, good. Well, we have a potential ending for this story, whether or not the issue is over. Perhaps, we can find some sort of, satisfying resolution. And I'm not going to give away the ending, but if you watch the news, what happens at the Vatican was a big fat nothing burger, as one reporter pointed out. So we have a very ironic sort of ending note that I feel is very reflective of what happened in this issue and what continues to happen. So I'm very proud to have been part of Mary's journey, and we followed her for probably 10 days, 7 to 10 days of nonstop press events and marches and vigils and all sorts of other incredible events that brought the survivors together. And also, just sort of talk to other people and other organizations that were fighting the same fight. And I feel like the stories are really compelling, and I'm very proud to tell them. And it's not just women who have been abused by nuns. There's also several men. So I feel their stories are equally important, and they need to be told in a similar fashion, in a you know and it's a timely issue, and I feel like right now is the cornerstone time to really shed as much light as possible on this issue so that we can address it and end the stigma around female predators.
I guess it's amazing what I'm listening to. So, are nuns abusing clergymen too? Is that crazy? Is that a crazy
Hmm.
thought? I mean, I'm
Well,
sure. I'm not sure, but clergymen are abusing nuns.
mhm.
Clergy are nuns abusing clergymen.
Well, I'm going to just throw in a hazard a guess. Yes, I would. I don't know if it's called abuse, but I could see nuns. I'll just use the word flirting
Ah.
because of one of the things I feel is really absurd, especially in the priesthood, is celibacy, the vow of celibacy.
Yeah, I want to
And
talk about that because what's the point?
and religious women have a vow of chastity, just a different name. But then we all have human needs, and some sisters and priests went into religious orders very young, and they didn't have opportunities to experience their sexuality. So I think it makes perfect sense that women, religious women, might try to build a relationship with an attractive clergy member and vice versa. And maybe it then becomes consensual sex. I don't really know.
Mhm.
But in any event, there's a breaking of their vows. And I think that needs to be faced. And in some cases, if I had my way, I'd drop it. But I'm not the Pope. Sorry to
Mhm.
say.
Well, so what would be okay, having this come out, the acknowledgement and all of that, but what would be a change, a theoretical change? How would we what would be, what would we do? How could this be changed? Do you know what I mean? I mean, how could you, with what you just said, celibacy,
Mhm.
how what would we do? What is ultimately a shift? Because,
Well,
when a nun and I'm Jewish too. So, when a nun takes that oath, you're young. What do you
mhm.
know about your sexuality or your desire or anything?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
where do you
And that
go? Yeah.
there's been a good shift in that. I believe the age for entering uh, clergy and or religious orders is has increased. Instead of 18, I believe in some orders you have to go to have a college or work experience or something of
Okay.
that sort. But it doesn't address the human needs. I
Right.
would think one thing that seems like a first step is optional, make celibacy optional in the
Mhm.
priesthood and optional for religious women.
Mhm.
Ideally, I would think it would be wise to not have either, because married clergy members in other faiths are very successful, can still minister and do good work and have some love in your life and sexuality
Right.
opportunity.
Um, yeah, well, in our synagogue, I mean, we have, our rabbi, and his wife is a rabbi, and they're both in our synagogue, and it's a conservative synagogue. It's not a reform synagogue, it's not an Orthodox, and
I
they
know.
both do their work.
And you think about, oftentimes I think about clergy. How do you counsel couples when you really have very little understanding of what it means to be in a committed sexual central relationship? I don't, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Mhm,
And part of the answer to your question would be the Pope. It all gets back to the Pope,
mhm,
who talks it one way, but really has done little to change things.
mhm. I hear you. Yeah, and I don't even know, like you just said, excuse me, how do you counsel a couple? How do you counsel a family? How do you do any of that? And you're right, I would never, I hadn't even thought about that. So, Stephanie, what are the stories that you are discovering? Are they, how similar to Mary's? How different? What are you finding?
Well, I have found it to be fascinating that almost every story is entirely different and also has a thread of similarity through it, running through the narrative. And I guess eh, one thing that one reason I wanted to do sort of a cross section and look at so many cases is to be able to make make sure that the audience or the viewers or the readers, whomever is digesting the story, have some sort of understanding that, again, this isn't one case. There are several cases, and that the situations may be slightly different. The states may be different, but I've found that in most cases, and I'm not sure that this is entirely indicative of Mary's situation, but in many cases, there are some issues with families, parents or sisters and brothers or uncles and aunts that have contributed to the making of a someone who we consider to be prey, not in the sense, the religious sense of P-R-A-Y, but
Right.
P-R-E-Y. So when you think about sexual predators, they are the predator, and their prey are the children or the vulnerable adults that they're going after and that they're pinpointing to be the sort of object of their desire or their sexual activity. And there have been some very enlightening stories about how and why those children, in most cases children are very young adults, 12 to 15-year olds, were from families in which at least maybe one member of the family had some questionable behavior happening at home, and it caused the child to seem vulnerable to the predator right off the bat, because we ask, well, why me? Why was this person chosen over another person? Well, the predator has a sense of like, oh, this person can be easily manipulated. This person's mother may be in a broken relationship. Maybe the husband has walked out with this wife or mother to try to gain access to the child. So, in many cases, the story goes beyond just the predator prey relationship, and we unpeel another layer of the family life of some of these survivors, in which they very bravely can now reflect back, and generally with lots of therapy and counseling, they are able to sort of look back on their lives. And that's how we sort of start the master interview. Is we start with the childhood and the story of coming up in the Catholic Church, and also what the family dynamics are like, and if there was incest at home, or a sexual predator in the family, or a family friend that was um, compromising the values of that family. That's not the child's fault. It's not the survivor's
Right.
fault that that happened to them, and they shouldn't have been subjected, but it is a reason why.
Mhm.
And in many cases, hearing people's stories over and over again, I've just noticed that predator who preys on the innocent often does so with very specific patterns, and that's why we call them a serial predator,
Mhm.
because they have a series of similar behavior patterns
So,
that make them a serial predator.
so
So
did
that's one aspect that I've
it's
found to be
fascinating.
a through line.
Yeah, and were you able to find some women that had been prey to the same predator, and you can identify something with that relationship?
As of now, I have not found any cases in which there are more than one, I want to say, survivor or victim by the same predator, except for in one case of a man in which several boys in a class of about 5th or 6th grade were abused by a specific teacher, a woman, when she was in her mid to late 30s. They were 11 or 12. And she actually, both men came forward and sued her, and she was actually put into jail. But there were other cases with that same predator with other little boys in other parishes or schools, that she committed the same crimes. One did not survive and committed suicide. And those stories are really important to us because we see that serial behavior, and we also realize in that story that these survivors are also boys, little boys, and who grow into men, who deal with the suffering of being a sexual abuse survivor, but in a very different way than women do. In some cases, a lot extreme alcoholism and drug abuse and depression. They tend to really bury their feelings as men and not seek the help maybe as soon as women. But their stories are just as harrowing and just as important to me in telling the story that these sexual predators are women, and it doesn't matter if the objects of those of the predatory behavior are men or women. They're still serial predators.
Absolutely. We need to talk about it all. So have you had the opportunity also to interview the predators?
That's a really good question, and one I get asked quite a bit. In most cases, many of the predators are deceased at this time, some by accident, some by old age, some we believe by suicide, in very probable cases related to the abuse. There are a couple of living surviving predators that we are interested in finding, but obviously those are the church and the orders really work hard at hiding those people, and in some cases they have been defrocked, or they've decided to put aside their status as a nun. So in most cases they're pretty elderly. They're in their 80s in some cases. Some are probably in their 70s, but we're talking about cases, at least that I've started studying, that came forward in the early, like mid to late 2000s, of of abuse. So the more recent cases that I've found are various women who were abused at the ages of 12 through 15 in the 70s. So their predators may be younger and still alive. The earlier cases I was covering in the early 2000s, or sort of 2008 through 10, were mostly children in the 60s. So their age difference is great. There's 15 to 20 years between those kinds of cases. So you have to look at also the sociological sort of progression of the United States. And like nuns stopped wearing the habit in the 70s, and they were cool nuns and running around in bell-bottom pants, and free love was happening then. It was a very different time than the early to mid 60s, when society was a little more buttoned up, and the Catholic Church was probably more strict, and the schools were more were more conservative. So we're looking at a span of cases that pretty much goes from the early 60s to the mid 70s. So 15 years of sort of anthropology behind these outlooks, seeing how our world and our society shaped the behaviors of these nuns and predators. More drug use in the 70s, and just sort of a different perception of being in a Catholic school versus in the 60s, if you were a child in a parish, versus a teenager in the 70s in Catholic school. It's a different mentality depending on the time and the person that you look at.
So so based on that, what assumption are you making based on the nun with a habit and the nuns without, the kids, who came to a Catholic school because they had, they were products of drugs or whatever? Are you making any assumptions to the current, I mean, and what might be happening today?
Well, my job isn't to make any assumptions. It's to tell the stories in a clear and effective way so that the viewer, the reader, the audience has a understanding and formulates their own opinion. So the less opinionated I am
Right.
about my own beliefs, I feel the more objective the story becomes, and viewers can begin to take away their own thoughts and opinions about what happened. But in a more sort of general way, I also have employed and brought in the voices of expert therapists who specialize in this topic. So I defer to them to
Hmm.
get, I ask them questions like, oh,
Oh, I think, hold on one second. We might have a
no
caller,
problem.
right? Hello.
Yes. Hi.
Hey.
My name is Hi. Hi. I'm calling. My name is Jim St. Patrick, and
Hi,
I saw
Jim.
on the Sisters Have Mercy website that you were taping a radio show.
Yes.
Yes. So I just thought I'd call in and see if I could participate.
Absolutely. Do you know Mary and Stephanie?
Well, yes, I know Stephanie. I was participated in filming of the documentary. It was one of the people that were filmed
Okay.
for an interview.
Oh, great. So thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Right.
Tell
Right.
us some of your story.
Okay. Well, right now I'm 66 years old. When I was in grade school, Catholic grade school, started in seventh grade with the nun Sisters of Mercy. The principal was started sexually abusing me. So that's what happened all through seventh grade and eighth grade. And as it went on in my life, I decided to press charges later on, which actually happened like 8 years ago, and the nun served a year in jail, and that's how I got my sort of satisfaction, I guess. Took her to trial and so forth. So she was found guilty. She's since passed away. Sister Norma Giannini. I don't know if you're familiar with that case, from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised.
Yeah, well,
Pretty famous.
so to give us a look, can you just give us a little background for people who are like me who don't know? And maybe if you
Oh,
tell me
sure.
a little of the story, I will know, but I don't recall her name.
Oh, okay. Well, uh, she's a sister. She's Reverend Sisters of Mercy nun, and she was at the time, I believe, like in her early 30s. And there was a grade school in Milwaukee South Side St. Patrick's School, and she was the principal, and she was sexually abusing more than me. There probably like 5 boys that she sexually abused, and got pretty reckless with her behavior. Things would happen right in the convent, in the front room of the convent, and I think, as it turned out, all the nuns that lived there were like 6 nuns that lived there actually knew about it. She had quite a reputation. She had come from Chicago, and she had been found to abuse some boys in Chicago as well. So she was transferred, one of those where they transfer you if they find something out. So she just carried on her behavior in Milwaukee. And well, actually, what happened further on, as I got older, I realized the damage it had done to me, from making me not believe in my religion or my teachings through the grade school, the Catholic philosophy and so forth. It ruined my belief system, because I held the nuns in high regard as in holy status beings on earth. So when that shattered that reality, I believe it shattered my religious beliefs. And well, as time went on, I was in my late 50s. I wanted to prosecute, so I did take it to the DA, and my story was taken. And the DA at the time found out my report and took my report and had it destroyed.
Yeah.
So I kept relentless. I kept going downtown, and finally I got the Sensitive Crimes Unit to listen to my story, and they found out that in fact my file was destroyed to hide my story, because the people were in cahoots with the archdiocese at the time.
Hmm.
So actually, I got Sensitive Crimes to pick it up, and they took it seriously. And we took it to court, and like I said, she was sentenced to a year, served a year, and has since passed away, I believe, like 5 years ago.
Mhm.
So anyways, that's my story in a nutshell.
Well, I first of all, I really appreciate you calling,
well,
because
sure. I was on Facebook, and I just happened to be browsing, and I saw, a comment from Stephanie.
Mhm.
So I saw the number, and I thought, well, I didn't quite know what I would say, but give a call and participate, because that's how these things get out there. People have to open their, open their mouth and tell their story. It's embarrassing to tell. I hate telling.
Oh, I bet you
because
do.
I lost a lot of friends, and people think about me, in a bad way. Not everybody, but a lot of people that I really liked from my youth
Mhm.
kind of took to me, looking to me, and I understand it. Like, boy, what was up with you, Jim? But at the time, I thought I was just so special, because here's the principal, paying all this attention to me, and I'm like 12, 13. So at the time, it was totally had me turned around. But as I got older, I saw the damage that it did to me.
Well, I really, 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 really appreciate you calling in, sharing your story.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Oh, I do, because I know you represent a lot of people
Mhm.
who are sitting out there who
Right.
are listening, or and they are embarrassed or covering
Yeah.
up, or whatever. And
Mhm.
we need everybody to share. We need men to share,
Right.
women to share. We need
Right.
everybody to share.
Yeah. You get embarrassed, but then you get angry. And I think when the anger comes,
Hmm.
and you realize, what you have lost, and how your life would have went differently,
Hmm.
your viewpoints on things. Because I love being Catholic and all the beliefs. And as that happened, and as it broke down, that a nun, we looked at the nuns as these human beings that were really partially anointed by Jesus, and they really had us brainwashed. I'm going to use that term, because it was. And when that happened, the sexual abuse, it really confused me, and then it just ruined my whole belief system with the Catholic Church.
So have you found your way back? Or, where are
No.
you with your religion now?
No, there's no way back.
Okay. Okay.
It's all gone.
It's all
There's
gone.
no way back. Yeah, I know reality, I think now.
Mhm.
And I have to be just strong within that, and not, be sad about it. But when I pass away, I'll find out what's going on.
Yes, you will.
Right?
Yes,
Yeah,
you
right
will.
now, everything is so confusing right now.
Well, you know what? It is. And, when you
Yeah,
listen to all
it
of
really is.
this, here I am, this nice little Jewish, old lady.
Oh.
And I'm listening to this, and I'm like, I too had a vision of nuns. I watched The Sound of
Yeah.
Music. I have a vision of nuns. And then I
Right.
meet Mary, who, and I hear her story, and I'm like, what? And then
Okay.
it's
Right.
like, I am flawed. But what I will like to say to you is,
Right.
what you're doing and speaking out
Hmm.
is a gift, and hopefully you can get peace with that, through
Right.
the anger, because
Hmm.
not it's I appreciate this. That's all I can tell you, and I know my audience does too.
Mhm.
Well, only thing is I won't be fooled again, you know, and it would take for Jesus to actually appear in my dimension, and I would see, and I would be able to connect. But right now, I'll never believe anybody ever again. You know, you know what I mean.
Well,
It just ain't gonna
yeah,
happen.
I hear
So that's
you.
what it did to
Thank
me.
you.
And okay,
Thank you.
well, I'm glad I could participate.
Absolutely. And just thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Jim, for calling in.
Okay, you're welcome.
And so let me remind everyone out there, if you want to call in, please feel free, 919-518-9773. And then you can do it on your computer, and in Skype, computers 2K voice. There's so many things that we can talk about, and so many ways of branching off. And one of the questions I have, well, good. Here's going to be somebody else, and I don't have to talk. Hello. Hello.
Yeah, is this 919?
Yes. Are you calling in to the show about abuse?
Yes,
Yes. Welcome. Hi. And you are?
Steve.
Hey, Steve. Do you know Mary and Stephanie?
Pardon me.
Do you know Mary and Stephanie?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
All right. Okay. Can you turn down your computer so we only hear you?
There we go.
Okay.
Can you hear me
Perfect.
now?
Yes. Thank you. So tell us.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I want to tell Jim, it's a lot of courage to call in. A lot of courage. And I want to thank Stephanie and Mary for their work on this topic. It's kind of the last taboo, It's horrendous. I was in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade when mine happened, and finally, probably 40 years later, I finally revealed it and got some therapy, and that helped me tremendously. I don't know how it works for other folks, but a couple of things. You think about how sexual abuse affects a young child. I mean, these are supposed to be our formidable years where we're supposed to be developing mentally, spiritually, sexually, and physically, and this just screws everything up. Mm-hmm. And listening, I don't believe, in my opinion, that celibacy, chastity does not cause the sexual abuse of children. It's these predators who, for lack of a better term, are good at what they do. They're good at spotting out vulnerable children, teens, and vulnerable adults. So I've talked to other people, males, that were sexually abused by nuns, and I know it's a tremendous struggle for them. Someday they may have the courage to come forward. They might not, but we're not the ones to tell them how to heal. So whatever they can do, it takes a lot of courage, and it's. I just can tell you, it screwed up my life pretty damn good. So, but now with people speaking out about it, it makes you stronger, and hopefully we can reach out to more victims of nuns.
Well, you both have taken my breath away, and I thank you for that. And you are both courageous. And one of the questions that I'm sitting here, and sometimes I think of my questions, and I'm like, I don't know, but has the Me Too movement made a difference for you and, survivors like you? Has this given you a platform? Has it, what has it done for you? Because that
No,
was a
I'd
lot
say
about
not.
women.
Yeah, I'd say not in
Okay.
my case. What bothers me is some of these nuns have spoken out in the Me Too movement, but they have done nothing to get their orders to admit that their orders have sexually abused kids, teens, vulnerable adults. Now, I'm sorry that happened to them, but um, their orders are not. I forgot when it was. I look back and about a while back, there's over 400 ordered nuns in the United States, and um, they're not. They only report to the Vatican. Very few report to their local bishop. So it's you know I don't know what to say, but no, the Me Too didn't affect me. I just thought it was um, they haven't reached out to their own victims.
Can I ask you a question, though? What difference would it have made if they reported directly to their local as opposed to the Vatican?
Yeah. Well, maybe be a little better response, but knowing the history of the bishops and that, it probably wouldn't have made much of a difference. But there's no centralized directory or whatever of female abusers in the religious order, and we know the church has hidden a lot of stuff, and we know the orders have hidden a lot of stuff. So no, I don't know. It might have had a little more effect on exposing predators as they report to the local bishops.
It appears to me, and maybe, one of you could speak to this. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking to myself also, has the religion been a cover? I mean, you don't just automatically, you're not a nun, you go into an order, or you're a priest or whatever, and go into an order and all of a sudden become a predator. You are kind of a predator before and using this as your cover.
Well,
That was a
I think
big,
you're
that
exactly
was a
right.
very
I mean,
enlightening moment for me when someone suggested that, and I thought,
Stephanie, we lost you.
clergy
Wait,
as
Stephanie,
sexual predators.
Stephanie, hold on. We lost you. Say it again because it was going to be good. We lost your answer.
Oh, I just said that was a big enlightening point for me when someone pointed that observation out, that perhaps these are child sex predators that entered the church specifically to gain access to young children, that they weren't just nuns who fell from grace or priests that had a moment of, sexual crisis, that they were actually potentially, in some cases, people seeking the church out as their protective ability to access children, and then be given this shroud of honor and pride, and almost, an ability to deflect any responsibility because the children were afraid to report them, or parents were uh, just incredulous about these claims, and so it's a perfect cover, in
Yeah,
my opinion.
right.
And then it becomes a systemic issue as it has, especially in the clergy, because they receive protection um, and covering up for each other. And so it breeds a very terrible problem.
Yeah, it's like the perfect crime.
Yes, yes, it is.
Goodness gracious. Okay. So, first of all, tell our audience what they can do to help. Where do they go? Do they need to write somebody? What do we all need to do?
Well, if you know anyone who has survived trauma, support them and be there for them when they need you. And if you're looking for some support, please contact snapnetwork.org or myself, Mary Dispenza, because we're there and we want to support in any way that we can. And I would just encourage you, as Steve said, there's no one way for your healing. There's only your way. But I encourage you to pay attention to your heart and be brave and follow that path because your healing is paramount.
Okay. And then what about you, Stephanie? Do you,
I
with
mean, I think that there's definitely power in numbers and power in the media right now. The social networks, obviously, really, really powerful tools globally to not only expose these predators and locate them or locate other survivors to know that you're not alone. I think that speaking up, even if you don't use your real last name, or you change your name, or you don't dispel the last names of your predators, however you feel most comfortable, coming forward. It's the media is a powerful tool, and that's the tool through which I'm hoping to advocate for change and understanding and acknowledgement and accountability. I feel like there have been other documentaries in the past that have literally changed policy.
Mhm.
So if you have a story that you are able and find a way to share, I think it can be a very powerful, um, social media, the media, documentaries, a series, whatever the outlet is. Just know that we're on your side, and we want to tell the story to bring policy change.
Mhm.
And the most effective way to do that is to enlighten people and educate them about what is happening, because this is a very unknown topic to most laymen and people, especially outside the Catholic Church. They just don't know it's happening.
Mhm. No, I know you're going to change policy. I have no doubt.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, you're going to change policy plus. So in the last moment we have, when we don't have much time, let me ask each of you just to share, one more bit of wisdom. I know that you just summed it up really well, Stephanie and Mary. I know you have. Is there anything else you want to put on the table?
It's already been said, but keep telling your stories. Stories have the power to change things.
Right.
And I think one thing Mary and I had said prior to this, appearance, because we were talking about it, is let's break the stigma together that, you shouldn't feel embarrassed to come forward. You should feel empowered and encouraged to come forward.
Mhm. Yeah.
Stigma is thing that society, those of us who are not victims or survivors or, third party objective seekers, we are in charge of our own taboos. Like Steve said, this is the last taboo. So let's change that stigma. Let's understand and respect the fact
Mhm.
that women can be sexual predators, and we need to treat them and punish them the same way that we would men, and acknowledge that these
Right.
survivors have real stories that need to be told.
Right. And I would also, and I honor the four of you for speaking today. And because we need to get this information out about the predators, and we need to help empower individual young people, whoever they are, wherever they are, that they do not have to succumb to somebody with power or money or anything. And I think it all matters. We need to talk about it so that people are talking about it, right?
Mhm.
And that our
Absolutely.
children, our teenagers, our future nuns, whoever you are, you can go into whatever religion and do whatever you want, and not have to feel, like you can't, or that if something happens to you like this, you're empowered so it won't happen.
Yeah, religion and sanctuary should be a sacred space, and we need to give that right to every single human being, and make sure that when they enter a synagogue, a church, a parish, doesn't matter what place of worship, but they are free to do so without the fear of sexual predating happening to them.
Absolutely.
Yes, because it's a terrible thing to have to give up your faith.
Yeah. Yeah, really. That's a really good point. So
To
so
lose lose that life.
Yeah, and we don't want to do that. And there's so much more to talk about. So I'm hoping that maybe you will come back again.
Oh, my goodness. I have so much to think about now again,
Yeah.
Yeah.
listening to the sharings and
So let's do it again, and maybe take a different perspective or another perspective or the same perspective or whatever. But I would love to keep this conversation going here and
thank
support you in the work that you're doing.
Thank
And
you so
you.
much.
yeah, and other men and other women and other children and whomever. I really feel that we must do that.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Marilyn. It's important to have these kinds of platforms, and obviously, Mary knows that I support the media, and we gave so many interviews in Rome, and same with Steve and Jim. I covered them in multiple states, and they were very proactive. I was really honored to tell their stories because they not only told their stories, but they were doing something about it. They were
Right.
pressing charges. They were addressing the nuns, firsthand at their annual conference in New Orleans. And it was very empowering and inspiring to see them take this kind of power back and do something positive for the next generation.
Absolutely. So I want to thank you so much. And then just for those of you who are unaware or maybe aware, I have several books up on Amazon, and it's all about giving a voice to a marginal group or a thought or an idea that we don't know enough about. And I like to bring people into the fold so that, the more we understand each other, the less judgment we will have. And the more, I may not like what you do, but I can live with you. So in just one afternoon, listening to the hearts of men, in just one afternoon, listening to the hearts of twins, millennials, and soon people impacted by opioid addiction. And I go on and on and on because these stories must be told if we are going to survive and, have a place for our children and grandchildren to grow and for the rest of us. So thank you both so very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And
Thank you.
my pleasure. And to the gentleman that called in, both of you, thank you. And for those of you who haven't called in yet, we will do this again. And please feel free to connect with me anytime at Marilyn@reenchantplanetearth.com, Marilyn@MarilynShannon.com. I'd love to hear from you. And, if you have a story and you want to come on and you want to share it, this is an open invitation. So thank you all so much. Bye-bye.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. If you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section at nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Telestream's Wirecast software, StreamingGear.com, Carolina Apparel, and DeltaForce.net.